The Winchester cracked like thunder against Morrison's skull, dropping him into the Wyoming dust as Clara Dalton stood over his body, her wedding dress soaked in blood that wasn't hers. "You want to know how a widow survives 5 nights alone on the prairie?" she whispered to young Ethan Hartley, whose trembling hand still gripped his father's rifle. "You don't sleep, you don't cry, and you never, ever show mercy." The ranch behind them burned against the sunset. 800 acres of dreams turned to ash. But in that moment of absolute destruction, something unbreakable was forged between them. Friends, this is a story of love born in gunpowder and grief. Watch till the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The funeral had ended 3 hours ago, but Ethan Hartley still stood at his father's grave, watching shadows stretch long across the Wyoming prairie. At 19, his shoulders weren't quite broad enough to fill his father's coat, and the weight of 800 acres pressed down on him like a physical thing. The September wind carried dust and the smell of coming rain rattling through the wooden crosses that marked 3 generations of Hartleys in this unforgiving soil. "Boy's gonna lose it all before Christmas," he'd heard Tom Morrison whisper at the service loud enough to be intentional. Samuel Hartley's probably spinning in that box, knowing his soft-handed son's all that's left to hold the ranch. Ethan's jaw tightened at the memory. Morrison had been circling like a vulture for years, waiting for his father to show weakness. Now, with Samuel Hartley 6 feet under, the waiting was over. The sun bled crimson across the horizon, painting the grassland in shades of rust and shadow. Ethan turned toward the ranch house, a 2-story structure his grandfather had built with his own hands 40 years ago. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney. Martha, their cook, always had supper ready by now. But Martha had left the day after the funeral, patting his cheek with tears in her eyes. "You're a good boy, Ethan," she'd said, "but this land needs a man grown, and I'm too old to watch it fall apart." He was alone now, completely, utterly alone, or so he thought. The figure appeared at the edge of his vision, materializing from the dying light like a ghost. Ethan's hand moved instinctively to the Colt at his hip, his father's gun still strange against his palm. "Easy there," a woman's voice called out, tired but not frightened. "I mean no harm." She stepped closer and Ethan could make out her features in the fading light. She couldn't have been more than 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun and a black dress that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that held him, green as spring grass, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with her years. "Name's Clara, she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Clara Dalton. I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, ma'am." Ethan's voice came out rougher than intended. He cleared his throat. "If you're looking for work, I'm afraid I can't." "Not looking for work." She shifted the small carpet bag in her hand. "Just a corner of your barn for the night. I can pay." Something in her tone made him study her more carefully. Her dress was quality, or had been once. The kind of dress a rancher's wife might wear to church. But the hem was torn mud-caked, and there were dark stains on the sleeves that looked suspiciously like blood. "You're running from something," he said. It wasn't a question. Her chin lifted slightly. "We're all running from something, Mr. Hartley. Question is whether we're running toward something better, or just running." The wind picked up, sending her hair dancing around her face. She tucked it back with one hand, and he noticed the pale band of skin on her ring finger where a wedding band had recently been. "Widow?" he asked. 3 weeks now." Her voice held no emotion, like she'd practiced saying it until the words meant nothing. Ethan looked back at his father's grave, then at the empty house waiting for him. His father would have sent her on her way. Samuel Hartley hadn't believed in charity or complications. But his father was dead, and Ethan was tired of being alone. "There's a room," he heard himself saying. "Used to be the cook's. It's not much, but it's got a bed and a stove." Her eyes widened slightly, the first real emotion he'd seen from her. "I couldn't impose." "You're not. Place feels like a tomb with just me rattling around in it." He started walking toward the house. "Come on. Gets cold quick once the sun's down." She followed, her boots crunching on the dry grass. "You always this trusting with strangers?" "My father used to say I was too soft for this land." He glanced back at her. Maybe he was right. Maybe not. Either way, he's not here to complain about it anymore. The house felt even emptier with another person in it, as if her presence highlighted all the missing pieces. Ethan lit the oil lamps while Clara stood in the doorway, taking in the main room with its stone fireplace and heavy wooden furniture. "It's a good house," she said quietly. "Solid. My grandfather built it, said a man's house should outlast him by generations." Ethan moved to the kitchen. "You hungry? I'm not much of a cook, but I've got beans and salt pork. I can cook." She set down her carpet bag and moved past him to the stove with the confidence of someone who knew their way around a kitchen. "You got flour lard? Should be some in the pantry." She found what she needed and set to work, her movements efficient and practiced. Within minutes, she had biscuits in the oven and beans simmering on the stove. The domestic sounds, the clatter of pans, the bubble of cooking food made something tight in Ethan's chest loosen just a fraction. "You said your name was Dalton," he ventured. "There's Daltons over in Laramie, cattle people." Her hand stilled for just a moment. "Different Daltons." He didn't push. In Wyoming, you learn not to ask questions when someone didn't want to answer them. Everyone had their secrets, their reasons for being where they were. They ate in relative silence, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and the wind testing the windows. The biscuits were light and perfect, the beans seasoned with something that made them actually taste good instead of just edible. "This is the best meal I've had since—" Ethan stopped, not wanting to finish the sentence. "Since your father passed." Clara's voice was gentle. "It's all right to say it. Pretending it didn't happen doesn't make it less real." "You sound like you know something about that." She pushed a bean around her plate. "My husband died 3 weeks ago, shot in our own home." The words hung between them like smoke. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, meaning it. "Don't be. He had it coming." She looked up, meeting his shocked expression with those steady green eyes. "That's why I'm running Mr. Hartley. I'm the one who shot him." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. Ethan sat frozen, his fork halfway to his mouth. Here was a confessed killer sitting at his table eating his food, and all he could think was how calm she looked about it. "You going to throw me out?" she asked, voice neutral, like she was asking about the weather. He set down his fork slowly. "Did he deserve it?" "He beat me for 3 years. That night he was fixing to do worse than beat me." Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, and Ethan noticed how carefully she'd been moving since she arrived. "So yes, Mr. Hartley, he deserved it." The lamp flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the first drops of rain began to patter against the windows. "Then you can stay," he said. She blinked, the first sign of surprise he'd seen from her. Just like that. "My father used to say I was no good at judging people. Too trusting." He stood gathering the plates. "But I watched him judge everyone harsh and die lonely because of it. Maybe my way's not worse." Clara stood to help him with the dishes moving stiffly. As she reached for a plate, her sleeve pulled back, revealing dark bruises in the shape of fingers around her wrist. "There's liniment in the washroom," Ethan said quietly. "For your ribs. My father used it when the horses got the better of him." She pulled her sleeve down quickly. "Thank you." They worked side by side at the wash basin, him washing, her drying. The domesticity of it should have felt strange, a widow and an orphan playing house, but instead it felt like something clicking into place. "The cook's room is through there," he said when they finished, pointing to a door off the kitchen. "Stove shares a chimney with this one, so it stays warm. There's blankets in the chest." "And where will you be?" There was something in her tone he couldn't quite identify. "Upstairs, my father's room, my room now, I suppose." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've got my father's shotgun up there, case you were wondering, case you were thinking of murdering me in my sleep." A smile ghosted across her lips, the first he'd seen from her. "If I was going to murder you, Mr. Hartley, I wouldn't wait until you were asleep. That's the coward's way." He found himself almost smiling back. "Good to know." She gathered her carpet bag and moved toward the cook's room, then paused in the doorway. "Why did you really let me stay?" Ethan considered the question, looking around the empty kitchen. "This place is too quiet. All I can hear is everything I should be doing, everything I'm probably doing wrong. Your voice, it drowns some of that out." She nodded like she understood. "Good night, Mr. Hartley." "Ethan," he said. "Just Ethan." Good night, Ethan. The storm rolled in properly around midnight, thunder shaking the house to its foundations. Ethan lay in his father's bed, too big, too empty, listening to the rain pound the roof. Lightning illuminated the room in stark flashes, showing him his father's things still exactly where they'd been left. The watch on the dresser, the Bible on the nightstand, the photograph of his mother dead these 15 years. He must have dozed because the next thing he knew, someone was pounding on the front door. Ethan jerked upright, grabbing the shotgun from beside the bed. The pounding came again, aggressive and demanding. Hartley. "Open up!" Morrison's voice. Ethan's stomach dropped as he pulled on his pants and boots. What was Morrison doing here in the middle of the night? He made it halfway down the stairs when Clara appeared from the kitchen, fully dressed despite the hour. She pressed herself against the wall out of sight from the door. "He's looking for me," she whispered. "How could he? Open this door, boy, or I'll break it down." Ethan looked at Clara, saw the fear she was trying to hide, and made his decision. He opened the door just wide enough to block the entrance with his body shotgun visible but not raised. Morrison stood on the porch water, streaming from his hat, two of his ranch hands behind him. Even in the storm, Ethan could smell whiskey on him. "Tom," Ethan said evenly. "Hell of a night for a social call. Cut the shit, boy. The widow Dalton's been seen heading this direction. You hiding her." "Why would I be hiding anyone?" Morrison pushed forward, trying to see past him. "Because you're soft, just like your daddy always said. Soft and stupid. That woman killed her husband in cold blood. There's a bounty on her head, $500 from the Dalton family." "I haven't seen any woman," Ethan lied, surprised at how easily it came. "You sure about that?" Morrison's eyes glinted dangerously. "Because if I find out you're lying, harboring a fugitive that's a crime boy, sheriff would have no choice but to lock you up, and who'd watch this ranch then?" The threat was clear. Without Ethan, the ranch would go to auction, and Morrison had the money to buy it. "I said I haven't seen her." Lightning flashed, illuminating Morrison's cruel smile. "Your father was a hard man, but at least he had sense. You're going to lose this place, boy. If not tonight, then soon. And when you do, I'll be waiting." He turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Hartley. That note your daddy had with the bank, I bought it. $1,200 due in 5 days. Hope you got it lying around somewhere." Ethan's blood turned to ice. $1,200 might as well have been 12,000. Morrison laughed, the sound cutting through the storm. 5 days, boy. Then this place is mine." They mounted their horses and rode off into the storm. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, the weight of what just happened crushing down on him. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "I've brought trouble to your door." "Trouble was already here," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "Morrison's been waiting for this chance. The money isn't there. My father spent everything keeping this place running through the drought last year." He laughed bitterly. "Morrison's right. I'm going to lose it all." Clara moved closer, and in the lamplight he could see determination replacing the fear in her eyes. "Maybe, maybe not. You stood up to him just now. That took courage. That was stupidity. He could have forced his way in, found you. But he didn't, because you didn't let him." She reached out, almost touching his arm before pulling back. "Your father might have been a hard man, but hardness isn't the same as strength. You did a kind thing letting me stay, a brave thing lying to Morrison. Don't let him make you think that's weakness." Thunder crashed overhead, and the rain intensified, hammering against the windows like it was trying to break in. "We should try to sleep," Ethan said, though he knew he wouldn't. "Tomorrow's going to come whether we're ready or not." Clara nodded and turned back toward her room, then stopped. "Ethan, thank you for everything." He watched her disappear into the darkness of the kitchen, then climbed back upstairs. The storm raged on, but somehow the house felt less empty than it had. Even with Morrison's threat hanging over him, even with only 5 days left, something had shifted. He lay back down in his father's bed, staring at the ceiling. 5 days. He had 5 days to come up with $1,200, or lose everything his family had built. But for the first time since his father's death, he wasn't facing it alone. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having washed the air clean. Ethan woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, confused for a moment before remembering Clara. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to find her at the stove, moving less stiffly than the night before. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." She plated eggs and bacon, setting them on the table with authority. "You fed me, gave me shelter. Least I can do is cook." They ate in companionable silence until the sound of horses made them both freeze. Ethan grabbed his shotgun, but Clara put a hand on his arm. "It's the sheriff," she said, peering through the window. "I recognize him from town." Sheriff McKay was a tall, weathered man in his 50s, fair but firm. Ethan had always respected him, but now with Clara in his house, that respect was tinged with fear. "Stay inside," he told Clara, then stepped out onto the porch. "Morning, Sheriff." "Ethan?" McKay dismounted his deputy, staying on his horse. "Heard Morrison was out here last night. Storm brought all kinds of trouble." McKay's eyes were shrewd. "Also heard there's a woman staying here." Ethan kept his face neutral. "Man can't have company without the whole county knowing." "Depends on the company." McKay stepped onto the porch, lowering his voice. "The widow Dalton's wanted for questioning, not murder. Not yet. But the Dalton family's pushing hard, and they've got influence." "I don't know any widow Dalton." McKay studied him for a long moment. "Your father was a hard man, but he was honest. Hope you got that from him along with this ranch." "I got what I got." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Word of advice, son. Morrison's been buying up debts all over the county. He's planning something, and it's not good. Watch yourself." He mounted his horse and started to ride off, then turned back. "And Ethan, if you happen to meet any widows in need of help, you might tell them the circuit judge comes through in 2 weeks. Sometimes when a person tells their side of things to the right judge, justice looks different than a mob expects." After they left, Clara emerged from the house. "He knows." "He suspects. That's different." She wrapped her arms around herself, looking small despite her straight posture. "I should go. I'm putting you in danger." "You're staying." The words came out harder than he intended. "Morrison's going to take this ranch in 5 days anyway. Least I can do is keep you safe until then. The money there has to be away, 800 head of cattle, but I can't get them to market alone. The horses aren't broken for sale. The land itself is worthless without the water rights, and those are tied to the deed." He laughed bitterly. "My father never planned on dying, never taught me the business side, just the work side." Clara was quiet for a moment, then said, "Show me the books." "What?" "The ranch books. Accounts, debts, assets. I kept my husband's books for 3 years. Maybe I can see something you can't." They spent the morning poring over his father's meticulous records. Clara's fingers traced columns of numbers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Here," she said suddenly, "these contracts for beef to Fort Laramie. They're still valid." "Far as I know, but the next delivery isn't for 3 weeks." "But you could deliver early. The Army always needs beef, and with the Sioux acting up, they'd probably pay premium for early delivery." Ethan stared at the contracts. That could work, but I'd need help driving the cattle. At least 4 men, and nobody's going to work for me against Morrison. Then we don't tell them it's against Morrison. We tell them it's a rush job for the Army. Good pay for quick work." She looked up at him, those green eyes fierce. "You think I can't ride, can't drive cattle? I was raised on a ranch, Ethan. I can do more than cook and keep books." Something bloomed in his chest. Hope, maybe, or something else he didn't want to name. "It's dangerous. Morrison finds out what we're doing. Then we'd better move fast." They worked through the afternoon planning the drive. Clara's knowledge surprised him. She knew routes, grazing spots, water holes. When she mentioned a shortcut through Devil's Canyon, he stared at her. "That's rough country. How do you know about it?" "My father used to drive cattle before he died. I listened more than he knew." A shadow crossed her face. "Then my mother remarried, and my stepfather sold me off to the highest bidder. That bidder was Robert Dalton." The casual way she said it, like it was just another fact, made Ethan's chest tight with anger. "Clara, don't pity me. I survived. That's more than Robert can say." That evening, Ethan rode to the neighboring ranches looking for hands. At the third stop, he found 2 brothers, Jake and Samuel Winters, young and hungry for work. $100 each for 5 days' work, he offered. Their eyes widened. That's near a year's wages, Jake said suspiciously. It's dangerous. Morrison might try to stop us. The brothers exchanged glances. Morrison's been squeezing our paw on his loan too, Samuel said. Count us in. By nightfall, he'd gathered 4 men willing to ride. Not ideal, but it would have to do. When he returned home, Clara had supper waiting and a map spread on the table. If we leave before dawn, take the canyon route, we can make Fort Laramie in 3 days, she said. Morrison won't expect that. He'll think we're heading to the rail depot at Cheyenne. You really mean to come? She looked up at him. You saved me from Morrison, from running. Least I can do is help you save your ranch. That night, another storm rolled in gentler than the first. Ethan found himself on the porch, watching lightning flash in the distance. Clara joined him, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. What did you expect? Your father's son, hard, cold, practical. She glanced at him. You're none of those things. That's why I'm going to lose the ranch. No. Her voice was firm. That's why you're going to save it. This land doesn't need another hard man. It needs someone who knows when to be strong and when to be kind. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of rain and sage. Clara shivered, and without thinking, Ethan moved closer, sharing his warmth. Tell me about him, Walt, he said. Your husband. She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, voice barely above a whisper, she said, He was handsome, charming, everything a young girl thinks she wants. The first time he hit me was our wedding night. Said I looked at another man too long during the ceremony. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. 3 years, she continued. 3 years of walking on eggshells, never knowing what would set him off. The night he died, he'd been drinking. Said he was going to teach me a lesson I'd never forget. He had a knife. Clara. I took his gun from the holster while he was unbuckling his belt. He laughed, said, I didn't have the courage. She turned to look at Ethan. He was wrong. Without thinking, Ethan reached out and took her hand. It was small and is calloused from work, but trembling slightly. I'm glad, he said fiercely. I'm glad you had the courage. She squeezed his hand and they stood there watching the storm, 2 broken people finding something whole in the shared silence. The next morning came too soon. In the pre-dawn darkness, Ethan and Clara worked alongside the hired hands preparing for the drive. 800 head of cattle, restless and wary, waited in the holding pens. You sure about this, boss? Jake Winters asked, eyeing Clara as she saddled her horse, one of Ethan's steadiest mares. I'm sure. Clara had bound her hair back and wore a pair of his father's old pants and a work shirt. She looked nothing like the desperate widow who'd appeared at his door 3 nights ago. She looked like she belonged here. Move out, Ethan called, and the drive began. The first day went smoothly, too smoothly. As they made camp that night at Willow Creek, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Morrison knows, Clara said quietly, appearing beside him as he stood watch. Probably. He'll try to stop us. Definitely. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I'm not sorry I came to your door. Neither am I. The second day they pushed hard, reaching Devil's Canyon by noon. The narrow passage with its towering red rocks and treacherous path had claimed more than one herd over the years. Single file, Ethan ordered, slow and steady. They were halfway through when the shots rang out. Morrison's men had positioned themselves on the canyon walls, firing down at them. The cattle panicked, threatening to stampede in the narrow space. The cattle! Clara shouted, spurring her horse forward to help control the herd. Ethan drew his rifle, returning fire while trying to keep his horse steady. Jake Winters took a bullet in the shoulder, nearly falling from his saddle. Get to cover! Ethan yelled. But there was no cover in the canyon, just sheer walls and panicking cattle. Then Clara did something that stopped his heart. She rode straight at the lead steer, getting in front of the stampede, turning them back on themselves. It was insane, suicidal, and it worked. The cattle milled in confusion instead of running. More shots rang out. Samuel Winters returned fire, his aim true. One of Morrison's men fell from his perch. Push through, Ethan ordered. Move, move, move. They drove the cattle hard, bullets whining overhead. Clara stayed at the front, fearless, her hair coming loose and streaming behind her like a banner. Finally, they burst from the canyon onto open ground. Morrison's men didn't follow. They'd lose any advantage in the open. "Jake's hit bad," Samuel called out. They stopped to tend the wound. Clara, without hesitation, tore strips from her shirt to bandage it. "You're insane," Ethan told her, riding into the stampede like that. She looked up at him, a wild light in her eyes. "We're alive, aren't we? You could have been killed. So could you. So could all of us." She finished with the bandage and stood. "That's what it means to fight for something, Ethan. You risk everything." They made Fort Laramie by nightfall, the lights of the settlement a welcome sight. The Army quartermaster, a round man named Peterson, came out to meet them. "Hartley wasn't expecting you for weeks. Situation changed. I need to sell now." Peterson examined the herd with an experienced eye. "Good stock. With the Indian troubles, we need the beef. I can offer $18 a head." Ethan's heart sank. That would give him just over $1,400, enough for the debt and a little extra, but not much to run the ranch on. 20, Clara said, stepping forward. 20 a head, or we take them to Cheyenne. Peterson looked at her in surprise, then at Ethan, who tried to look like this was planned. "Army doesn't negotiate with suppliers who rode through Morrison's guns to get you beef." Clara's voice was steel. 20, Mr. Peterson. "You know it's fair." Peterson grumbled but nodded. 20 it is. $16,000. Ethan could barely breathe. It was more money than he'd ever seen. As Peterson counted out the payment, Morrison himself rode up with a dozen men. "That's stolen cattle," he announced loudly. "This boy owes me money. Those cattle are collateral." "The debt's not due for 2 more days," Ethan said, standing straighter. "Contract says I can call it in early if I suspect fraud." Morrison's smile was vicious. "And harboring a murderer sounds like fraud to me." He pointed at Clara. "That's Clara Dalton, wanted for murdering her husband. This boy's been hiding her." Peterson looked uncomfortable. The soldiers with him shifted hands, moving to weapons. "That true, ma'am?" Peterson asked. Clara stepped forward, chin high. "I'm Clara Dalton. I shot my husband when he came at me with a knife intent on killing me. I shot him to save my own life." "Murder is murder," Morrison spat. "Self-defense isn't murder," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Sheriff McKay riding up Judge Harrison beside him. The circuit judge had come early. "Your Honor," Morrison started, but the judge held up a hand. "I've been investigating this case, Mr. Morrison. Interesting what I found. 3 women in Laramie with similar stories about Robert Dalton. Seems he had a pattern." The judge looked at Clara. "Mrs. Dalton, I'm prepared to hear your case right now if you're willing." Clara looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm willing." What followed was the strangest trial Ethan had ever seen held right there in the fort courtyard. Soldiers and cowboys as witnesses. Clara told her story simply, without tears or dramatics. She showed the scars Robert had left. She described that final night in clinical detail. When she finished, the judge was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Dalton, in the matter of the death of Robert Dalton, I find you acted in self-defense. You're free to go." Morrison erupted. "This is a sham. You can't—" "I can, and I have," the judge said mildly. "Now, about this debt issue. Mr. Hartley, do you have the money?" Ethan held up the Army payment. "Right here, Your Honor." "Then pay Mr. Morrison and be done with it." Ethan counted out $1,200, handing it to Morrison with satisfaction. The man's face was purple with rage. "This isn't over, boy," he snarled. "Yes," Sheriff McKay said firmly. "It is, unless you'd like me to investigate how you came by all these debts you've been buying up. Might find some interesting irregularities." Morrison mounted his horse, his men following. As he rode off, he looked back one more time. "You haven't won anything, Hartley. That ranch will still be mine." After they left, Clara sagged against Ethan, exhaustion finally showing. "It's over," she whispered. "No," Ethan said, surprising himself with his certainty. "It's just beginning." They rode home slowly. Jake Winters supported between his brother and another hand. The ranch appeared at sunset whole and waiting. As the hands headed to the bunkhouse with their pay and bonuses, Ethan and Clara stood on the porch looking out at the land. "You could go anywhere now," Ethan said. You're free. You have money from the drive. Is that what you want? For me to go? He turned to look at her. This remarkable woman who'd walked into his life just days ago and changed everything. No, he said simply. I want you to stay. She smiled the first full, real smile he'd seen from her. Then I'll stay. That night, as they sat by the fire, Clara told him about her dreams for the ranch, better breeding stock contracts with the railroad, maybe even sheep on the high pastures. Ethan listened, watching the firelight play across her face, and realized something had shifted in him. The boy who'd stood at his father's grave was gone. In his place was someone new, someone shaped by these 5 nights of struggle and revelation. My father was wrong, he said suddenly. Clara looked at him questioningly. He said I was too soft for this land, but he was wrong. It wasn't softness, it was knowing when to be hard and when to be gentle, when to fight and when to show mercy. He reached out, taking her hand. You taught me that. We taught each other, she corrected. Outside, coyotes howled at the moon, and the wind sang through the grass. The house that had felt like a tomb now felt like a home. The ranch that had seemed doomed now held promise. 5 nights. That's all it had taken. 5 nights to lose everything and find something better in its place. As they sat there, hands linked, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, yes, but no longer faced alone. The land would test them. Morrison would surely try again, and there would be other challenges neither of them could foresee. But tonight, in this moment, they had won. Not just the ranch, not just freedom, but something more precious. They had found each other. The fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney like prayers to the star-filled sky. And in the warm circle of its light, 2 souls who had been broken found themselves whole. The morning after their return from Fort Laramie brought no rest. Ethan woke before dawn to find Clara already in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she kneaded bread dough with fierce concentration. The bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow-green shadows, but she still moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to navigate pain. Couldn't sleep, he asked, pouring himself coffee from the pot she'd already made. Sleep feels like wasting time, she said without looking up. Morrison won't let this go, Ethan. Men like him never do. They're like rattlesnakes. Even after you think you've won, they're coiled and waiting to strike again. She was right, of course. The $1,200 debt had been just the opening move in whatever game Morrison was playing. Ethan had seen it in the man's eyes as he'd ridden away from Fort Laramie. This wasn't over. Then we'd better be ready, Ethan said, moving to stand beside her at the counter. What do you know about Morrison that we can use? Clara's hands stilled in the dough. When I was in town 3 days before I came here, I overheard something at the general store. Morrison was talking to some men I didn't recognize, rough types not from around here. He mentioned something about the Hutchkins brothers. Ethan's blood ran cold. The Hutchkins brothers are outlaws. They've been terrorizing settlements up north for years. Whatever Morrison's planning, it's bigger than just taking your ranch. Clara shaped the dough into loaves with practiced movements. We need allies, Ethan. We can't face him alone. The other ranchers are all either in debt to him or too scared to cross him. Not all of them. Clara turned to face him, flour still on her hands. The Winters brothers. They rode with us against Morrison's men. Their family has a spread east of here, don't they? Small place. Their father, old Pete Winters, can barely keep it running. But he's got 2 sons willing to fight, and probably others who are tired of Morrison's stranglehold on this valley. She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving white streaks. We need to talk to them. The bread was in the oven when they heard horses approaching. Ethan grabbed his rifle, but Clara put a hand on his arm, peering through the window. It's the sheriff, she said, and he's not alone. Sheriff McKay dismounted, followed by a young woman Ethan didn't recognize. She was perhaps 20, with dark hair and a determined set to her jaw that reminded him oddly of Clara. Morning, Ethan. Mrs. Dalton. McKay tipped his hat. This is Miss Sarah Morrison. Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. Morrison's daughter. His niece. The young woman corrected, her voice steady despite the fear Ethan could see in her eyes. And I'm here because my uncle is planning something terrible, and you're the only ones who might be able to stop him. Clara stepped forward, studying the girl with sharp eyes. Why would you betray your own blood? Because blood doesn't give someone the right to destroy innocent people, Sarah said. My uncle killed my father 10 years ago. Made it look like an accident, but I know better. He wanted our land, and he got it. Now he wants yours, Mr. Hartley, and he won't stop until he has the whole valley. Why should we trust you? Ethan asked. Sarah reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a leather journal. Because I have his records. Every dirty deal, every bribe, every threat. It's all here. McKay spoke up. I've looked through it. If even half of this is true, Morrison could hang. It's all true, Sarah said firmly. But evidence isn't enough. He's got Judge Patterson in his pocket. Not Judge Harrison, who freed you, Mrs. Dalton, but the territorial judge. And he's hired the Hutchkins brothers. They'll be here within the week. Clara took the journal, flipping through pages covered in neat handwriting. This details murders. 3 of them. 4 counting my father. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Mr. Hartley, he plans to kill you and make it look like Mrs. Dalton did it. A jealous widow driven mad by her husband's death. Then he'll take your land legally as compensation for his help in bringing a murderer to justice. The kitchen fell silent except for the crackle of fire in the stove. The smell of baking bread seemed incongruous with talk of murder. When? Ethan asked. 5 days. He's gathering men at the old Donovan place. It's been abandoned for years, perfect for hiding outlaws. How many men? 20, maybe 25. The Hutchkins brothers have their own gang of about 8 plus Morrison's regular hands. Ethan felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. 25 men against what? Him and Clara. I'll deputize some men, McKay said. But most folks won't stand against Morrison. Too scared. Then we make them more scared of doing nothing, Clara said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. Sarah, does that journal mention the Roberts family, their daughter, who disappeared last spring? Sarah nodded slowly. He sold her. To a brothel in Denver. The Cheneys. Their well that went dry after they refused to sell. He had it poisoned. Clara's eyes blazed with determination. Then we show everyone. We gather the families he's hurt, show them proof. Make them understand that doing nothing means waiting for their turn to be destroyed. That could work, McKay said thoughtfully. But we'd need to move fast and careful. Morrison has eyes everywhere. Not everywhere, Sarah said. There's a meeting place, the old church at Sweetwater. It's been abandoned since the flood 5 years ago. We could gather people there. Ethan felt something shifting like pieces falling into place. Tonight. We spread the word quietly today. Meet tonight. I'll handle the north side of the valley, McKay said. You two take the south. Sarah, you'd better stay here if Morrison finds out what you've done. I know. Her voice was quiet but firm. I knew when I took that journal that I was signing my own death warrant if he catches me. He won't catch you, Clara said with quiet intensity. We won't let him. They spent the day riding from ranch to ranch, speaking in low voices to men and women worn down by Morrison's tyranny. Some doors slammed in their faces. Others opened slowly, revealing faces marked by fear and desperate hope. At the Cutter place, old Martha Cutter wept when Clara showed her the entry about her son killed 3 years ago in what everyone thought was a riding accident. I knew it, she whispered. I knew my boy could ride better than that. Morrison wanted our water rights. Come to the church tonight, Clara said gently. Bring anyone you trust. At the Jimenez ranch, Miguel Jimenez's face went dark with rage when he read about Morrison burning out his cousin's family across the county line. I'll be there, he said simply, with my sons. By the time they returned home, the sun was setting. Sarah had prepared a simple meal, moving around the kitchen with the same easy familiarity Clara showed. Watching them, Ethan was struck by how quickly his empty house had filled with purpose and life. You cook like someone taught you well, Clara observed. Sarah smiled sadly. My mother. Before she died, she said knowing how to feed people was a form of power. You can bring folks together around a table, make them feel human again. Smart woman, Clara said. They ate quickly, aware of time pressing. As they prepared to leave for the meeting, Ethan found himself checking his guns, his father's Colt and the Winchester rifle. Clara did the same with a small pistol she'd produced from her carpet bag. "You know how to use that?" he asked. She gave him a look that made him feel foolish for asking. Robert wasn't the first man to underestimate me. He was just the last. The old church at Sweetwater stood like a skeleton against the night sky, its roof partially caved in from the flood damage. But the main floor was solid, and as Ethan and Clara arrived, they found nearly 30 people already gathered, with more arriving. Sheriff McKay stood at what had been the pulpit, Sarah's journal in his hands. The crowd was restless voices murmuring with fear and anger. "Folks," McKay called out, "we all know why we're here. Morrison's pushed every one of us, taken from every one of us. Now we got proof of just how far he's gone." He began reading from the journal, and with each entry, the crowd's mood shifted from fear to rage. When he reached the part about the Roberts girl, her father let out a sound like a wounded animal. "We get her back," Ethan said, stepping forward. "All of it. We make him pay for all of it. But first we have to survive what's coming." "How?" someone called out. "He's got professional killers coming." "We've got something he doesn't expect," Clara said, moving to stand beside Ethan. "We've got each other, and we've got the truth." "Truth don't stop bullets," old Pete Winters said. "No, but it makes people willing to fire them back," Clara replied. "Morrison's counted on our fear, our isolation. He picks us off one by one because we don't stand together. But look around you. 30 people here, probably more who couldn't come. That's enough to make a difference." "She's right," Miguel Jimenez said. "My family came to this valley 40 years ago. We've fought drought winter disease. We survived because we helped each other. Morrison made us forget that, made us afraid of our own neighbors." "So what's the plan?" Martha Cutter asked, her weathered face set with determination. Ethan looked at Clara, then at the assembled crowd. "We make our stand at my ranch. It's defensible. Good sight lines, solid buildings. When the Hutchkins brothers come, we'll be ready." "That's suicide," someone protested. "Fighting outlaws head on." "Not head on," Clara said. "Sarah told us they're planning to attack in 5 days. That gives us time to prepare. Fortify positions, set up crossfire zones. My father fought in the Indian Wars. He taught me about defensive positions. And we don't just defend what," Ethan added. "Sheriff, with that journal, can you get federal marshals involved?" McKay nodded. "Already sent a rider to Cheyenne, but they won't get here for a week at least." "Then we hold for a week," Ethan said simply. The meeting went on for hours, plans taking shape. The Winters brothers would bring ammunition from their father's stockpile. The Jimenez family had dynamite from their mining days. Martha Cutter's nephews were crack shots who'd won prizes at county fairs. As people began to leave, taking different routes to avoid suspicion. Clara found herself standing with Ethan in the ruined church, moonlight streaming through the broken roof. "You did well tonight," she said. "Your father would be proud." "My father would have called this foolishness. Standing with others, trusting them. He never believed in that." "Then maybe he was wrong about more than just you being too soft." Ethan turned to look at her, moonlight catching her green eyes. "Clara, when this is over, don't," she said softly. "Don't make promises about after. We might not have an after." "Then I'll make a promise about now," he said, stepping closer. "Right now in this moment, I'm glad you walked out of that sunset 5 nights ago. Whatever happens, I'm glad." She reached up her hand, touching his face gently. "So am I." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Both of them aware of how the darkness might hide watching eyes, but they made it safely, finding Sarah waiting anxiously by the window. "Did people come?" she asked. "More than we hoped," Clara told her. "Your courage in bringing that journal, it changed everything." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so afraid for so long. Afraid of him, afraid of what he'd do if he knew I knew. But when I heard what happened at Fort Laramie, how you stood up to him, I realized being afraid was killing me slowly anyway." The next morning brought the first families to the ranch. The Winters arrived with a wagon full of ammunition and supplies. The Jimenez clan came with their dynamite and tools for fortification. By noon, the ranch looked like a military encampment. Clara took charge of organizing defenses with surprising authority. She had men digging trenches at strategic points, setting up barricades that would provide cover while allowing for retreat if needed. "You've done this before." Ethan observed, watching her direct the placement of a wagon to create a shooting position. I told you my father fought in the wars. He used to draw battle plans in the dirt, explain tactics to me. Said a woman alone needed to know how to defend herself. Her smile was grim. He had no idea how right he was. Jake Winters, his shoulder still bandaged from the canyon ambush, worked alongside his brother setting up ammunition stores. Never thought I'd be preparing for war on the Hartley Ranch, he said. It's not war, Ethan corrected. It's justice. Sometimes they're the same thing, old Pete Winters said, checking his ancient but well-maintained rifle. On the second day, Morrison sent a messenger, one of his newer hands, a young man who looked terrified to be there. Mr. Morrison wants to talk, the boy stammered. Says he'll meet you at the boundary marker, just you and him. Ethan started to refuse, but Clara put a hand on his arm. Go, she said. See what he wants. Maybe we can learn something. It's a trap. Everything's a trap now, but knowledge is power, and we need all the power we can get. Ethan rode out to the boundary marker rifle, across his saddle, every nerve alert. Morrison was already there, sitting his horse with the casual arrogance of a man who thought he'd already won. Boy, Morrison said by way of greeting. Tom, heard you've been gathering folks at your place, planning something stupid. Just having a barn raising, Ethan said evenly. Neighbors helping neighbors. Morrison laughed an ugly sound. You think you're clever, don't you? You and that murdering whore you're betting. Ethan's hand moved to his gun, but Morrison held up a hand. Now, I'm here to make you an offer. One last chance to see sense. I'm listening. Leave. Tonight. Take the widow with you. I'll give you $5,000 and safe passage to California. You can start over, build something new. All you have to do is sign the ranch over to me. And if I refuse, Morrison's smile was cold, then in 3 days, the Hutchkins brothers will ride through your ranch like a plague. Every person there will die. Men, women, doesn't matter. And when the smoke clears, I'll have legal claim to the land as recompense for the murder of multiple citizens. You're insane. I'm practical. This valley needs strong leadership, someone with vision. Your father understood that even if he was too stubborn to accept it. You're a young boy. Don't throw your life away for dirt and grass. Ethan thought about Clara's fierce determination, Sarah's courage in betraying her uncle, the faces of all those people ready to fight. It's not about dirt and grass. It's about what's right. Morrison shook his head. Right, wrong. Those are words weak men use to justify their failures. The strong take what they want. Is that what you told yourself when you killed Sarah's father, your own brother? Morrison's face darkened. The girl's been talking, has she? Another mistake you'll regret. The only mistake was letting you terrorize this valley for so long. 3 days, boy, 3 days, and then we'll see who's right. Morrison wheeled his horse and rode off. Ethan sat there for a moment watching him go, then rode back to the ranch. Clara met him at the door, worry etched on her face. What did he want? Ethan told her about the offer, the threat. Her face hardened with each word. 3 days, she said. He's moved up his timeline. We need to get word to the sheriff, to everyone. Already done. I sent riders out as soon as you left. She smiled slightly. I told you I know men like Morrison. They always show their hand too early when they think they've won. That night, more people arrived. Some brought food, others weapons. The Roberts, still grieving their daughter, came with grim determination. Even some of Morrison's own hands showed up, disgusted by what they'd learned. He's gone too far, one said. We signed on to ranch work, not murder. The ranch transformed into a fortress. Trenches connected defensive positions. Ammunition was distributed strategically. Clara worked with the women to prepare medical supplies, teaching them basic field treatment. You're not just defending a ranch, she told them. You're defending the future of this valley, your children's future. Sarah proved invaluable, her knowledge of her uncle's tactics helping them prepare counters. He always attacks at dawn, she said. Says men are weakest when they're just waking. Then we make sure we're awake, Ethan said. On the evening of the second day, as they were finalizing defensive positions, Clara found Ethan alone on the porch, staring out at the land. You're thinking about your father, she said, wondering what he'd make of all this. His ranch turned into a battlefield. I think he'd be proud that you're fighting for it. Just maybe not in the way you are. Ethan turned to her. Clara, I need to say this in case I told you no promises about after. Not a promise, just truth. You changed everything. Not just the ranch, not just the fight against Morrison. You changed me. Made me see that strength isn't about being hard. It's about knowing what's worth fighting for. She moved closer, her hand finding his. You want to know the truth. When I walked out of that sunset, I was running. No destination, no hope, just running. Then I saw you at that grave looking as lost as I felt, and something made me stop. Call it fate, call it chance, but something made me stop. I'm glad it did. So am I. They stood there, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the ranch. Tomorrow would bring preparation, the day after war. But tonight they had this moment of peace. Inside the house, Sarah was teaching some of the younger men to load rifles quickly. The Winters brothers were showing others how to set up overlapping fields of fire. Martha Cutter was organizing the women into teams for loading weapons and tending wounded. Never thought I'd see the day, old Pete Winters said, watching the activity. The whole valley working together. Fear makes people do strange things, Sheriff McKay said. Sometimes it makes them cower. Sometimes it makes them fight. And sometimes, Clara added, joining them, it makes them realize what they should have known all along, that they're stronger together than alone. The night deepened and people settled into shifts for watch. Ethan found himself walking the perimeter with Miguel Jimenez, the older man, silent but steady beside him. Your father was a hard man, Miguel finally said, but he was fair. Never cheated anyone, always kept his word. He wasn't much for working with others. No, but maybe that was his generation's way. Maybe your way is better. They passed one of the defensive positions where Jake Winters sat with his rifle, his wounded shoulder making him grimace. How you holding up? Ethan asked. Better than I will be if those outlaws get through, Jake replied with dark humor. Though I got to say, following you and Mrs. Dalton into that canyon was the craziest thing I ever did. And you're here to do it again. Well, the pay was good, Jake grinned. And besides, my pa would tan my hide if I didn't stand with neighbors against those who'd hurt them. As dawn approached on the third day, tension filled the ranch like smoke. Every sound made people reach for weapons. Clara moved through the positions, checking on people, offering encouragement. Remember, she told them they're expecting scared farmers. Show them Wyoming steel instead. Ethan found her as the first light touched the eastern horizon. You should stay in the house. It's safer. She gave him a look that could have melted iron. Ethan Hartley, if you think I'm hiding while others fight for our home, you don't know me at all. Our home. She flushed slightly, but held his gaze. That's what it's become, isn't it? These 5 days, it's become our home. Before he could respond, a shout went up from the watch. Riders coming fast from the east. Everyone rushed to positions. Ethan grabbed his rifle, Clara beside him with her pistol. But as the riders got closer, they recognized Sheriff McKay with 2 other men. Federal marshals, McKay called out. They made better time than expected. The 2 marshals were weathered men who looked like they'd seen plenty of trouble. They examined Sarah's journal with professional interest. This is enough to hang Morrison twice over, one said. But we need to catch him in the act for it to stick. He'll be here tomorrow morning, Ethan said, with the Hutchkins brothers and about 20 men. The marshal smiled grimly. Then we'd better be ready for them. The rest of the day was spent in final preparations. The marshals took charge of tactical planning, impressed by what Clara had already organized. You've got a good head for this, ma'am, one told her. I had good teachers, she replied. As night fell, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. He walked out to his father's grave needing something. Guidance, maybe, or just the illusion of his father's presence. Clara found him there as he'd somehow known she would. He'd be proud, she said softly. Maybe not of how you're doing it, but that you're fighting for what's his, what's yours. What's ours, Ethan corrected. She smiled in the darkness. Yes, ours. When this is over. When this is over, we'll rebuild. We'll make this ranch something neither of us could make alone. She took his hand. But first we survive tomorrow. They walked back to the house together, passing the positions where their neighbors kept watch. In the kitchen, Sarah was making coffee, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I keep thinking about my father," she said. "How he stood up to Uncle Tom and died for it. I don't want to die, but I don't want to live knowing I did nothing." "Your father would be proud," Clara told her. "You're doing what he couldn't. You're not standing alone." The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. 3 in the morning, 4. People checked weapons, adjusted positions. 5. The eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly. Then as the first real light touched the horizon, they heard it, the thunder of many horses approaching. "Positions!" Ethan called out, though everyone was already ready. They came from 3 directions at once. Morrison was smarter than they'd given him credit for. The main force from the east, a smaller group from the north, and Morrison himself with picked men from the west. "Hold your fire," the marshal called out. "Let them commit to the attack." The riders swept closer, and Ethan could make out faces. The Hutchkins brothers recognizable from wanted posters, Morrison's regular hands, and hired guns' faces hard and purposeful. At 50 yards, Morrison held up a hand, stopping his forces. He rode forward alone just out of rifle range. "Last chance, Hartley," he called out. "Send out the widow and my niece, and the rest of you can live." "Come and get them," Ethan shouted back. Morrison's face twisted with rage. "So be it!" He raised his hand to signal the attack. That's when Clara stood up from her position, visible to all. "Tom Morrison?" She called out, her voice carrying across the morning air. "You're finished. The federal marshals are here. Your journal's been read. Every crime, every murder. It's all known." For a moment, Morrison froze. Then his rage exploded. "Kill them all!" he screamed. The attack began, riders charging from 3 directions, guns blazing. The defenders opened fire, the morning exploding with gunfire. Clara dropped back into cover as bullets whined overhead. The preparation paid off. The crossfire positions caught the attackers by surprise. The northern group ran into the dynamite charges. The Jimenez family had set horses screaming as the ground erupted. But Morrison's men were professionals. They dismounted, taking cover, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Jake Winters cried out as a bullet found his leg. Martha Cutter dragged him to safety, her own rifle never stopping its steady fire. The Hutchkins brothers led a charge at the main barricade. Ethan and Clara fired side by side, their shots coordinated without words. One brother went down, then the other, their gang faltering without leadership. But Morrison himself led his picked men in a flanking move, trying to get behind the defenses. That's when the federal marshals made their move, catching Morrison's group in a deadly crossfire. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Gradually, the attacking force weakened. Some fled, some fell, some threw down their weapons in surrender. Finally, Morrison stood alone, his men dead or fled, facing the ranch with naked hatred on his face. He raised his rifle, aiming directly at Clara. Ethan moved without thinking, stepping in front of her as Morrison fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. As he fell, he heard 2 shots, Clara's pistol and a marshal's rifle firing simultaneously. Morrison crumpled the rifle, falling from his hands. Then silence. The terrible silence that follows battle, broken only by the moans of the wounded. "Ethan," Clara dropped beside him, her hands pressing against his shoulder. "Don't you dare die on me. Not planning on it." He gasped, though the pain was extraordinary. Sarah appeared with medical supplies, her uncle's body visible behind her. She didn't look at it, focusing on helping Clara treat Ethan's wound. "It went through clean," Clara said, relief clear in her voice. "You'll live." As the sun climbed higher, the full scope of the victory became clear. Morrison was dead, the Hutchkins brothers too. Their gang was scattered or captured. The federal marshals were already organizing statements, gathering evidence. The price had been high, 3 defenders dead, many wounded. But the valley was free. Sheriff McKay stood over Morrison's body, shaking his head. 10 years of fear ended in 10 minutes of fighting. "It wasn't the fighting that ended it," Clara said, still kneeling beside Ethan. "It was people standing together. The fighting was just the final expression of that." As the wounded were tended and the dead, covered people began to realize what they'd accomplished. The weight that had pressed on the valley for so long was gone. "What happens now?" someone asked. Now we rebuild, Ethan said, letting Clara help him to his feet. We help each other like neighbors should, like we should have been doing all along. Old Pete Winters spat tobacco juice and nodded. About damn time. As the sun reached its zenith, Sarah stood looking down at her uncle's body. Clara moved beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. He was family, Sarah said quietly. Monster or not, he was family. Family isn't blood, Clara told her. Family is the people who stand with you when everything goes to hell. Look around you. This is your family now. Sarah looked at the people working together, tending wounded, already talking about the future, and managed a small smile. I can live with that. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the federal marshals finished documenting the scene, but Ethan barely noticed the heat. His shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, the bandages Clara had wrapped already showing spots of blood. She hadn't left his side since the shooting stopped, her hand resting on his good arm, as if she needed the physical connection to believe he was still alive. You're a damn fool stepping in front of a bullet like that, she said for the third time, though her voice held more relief than anger. You'd have done the same, he replied, wincing as Sarah helped him into a chair on the porch. That's different. How? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it, her green eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite read. Around them, the ranch bustled with activity as neighbors tended to their wounded and the marshals questioned witnesses. The bodies of Morrison and his men had been loaded onto a wagon covered with canvas that did little to hide the shapes beneath. Marshal Henderson, the senior of the two federal lawmen, approached with his notebook. Mr. Hartley, I need your statement about what happened here. Tom Morrison tried to take my land through force, Ethan said simply. We defended ourselves. With quite a bit of organization from what I can see. Henderson's weathered face showed approval. Mrs. Dalton, your tactical planning saved lives today. Clara's chin lifted slightly. My father always said that in a fight, preparation matters more than courage, though we had both today. The marshal nodded, making notes. The journal Miss Morrison provided, combined with what happened here, will be more than enough for the territorial court. Morrison's assets will be seized, his debts nullified. The people he wronged will have some measure of justice. Well, Sarah, who had been checking on Jake Winters' leg wound, looked up at this. His assets, but those were built on blood and theft, which is why they'll be distributed among his victims, Henderson explained. The Roberts family will have funds to search for their daughter. The Cutters will receive compensation for their son's death. Every family he destroyed will get something back. Money doesn't bring back the dead, Martha Cutter said quietly from where she sat beside her nephew's stretcher. No, ma'am, it doesn't. Henderson agreed. But it might help the living rebuild. As the marshals continued their work, Dr. Brennan arrived from town, his medical bag in hand. The elderly physician had been notably absent during Morrison's reign of terror, but now he moved among the wounded with practiced efficiency. Bullet went clean through, he told Ethan after examining his shoulder. You're lucky. An inch lower and it would have shattered bone. You'll heal, but you need rest. Rest can wait, Ethan said, trying to stand. The world tilted alarmingly, and only Clara's quick support kept him from falling. Rest cannot wait, she said firmly. The ranch will survive a few days without you trying to be a hero. Listen to the lady, Dr. Brennan advised. She seems to have more sense than you do. As the doctor moved on to other patients, Clara helped Ethan inside. The house felt different now, marked by violence, but also by victory. Bullet holes scarred the walls, and a window was shattered where someone had fired through it, but the structure stood solid. My grandfather built this place to last, Ethan murmured, running his good hand along a wall. And now you've given it a future, Clara replied, easing him onto the sofa. Your grandfather would be proud. Sarah entered with a pot of coffee, her movements careful and controlled. The young woman had aged years in the past hours, her uncle's death leaving her orphaned but somehow stronger. The Jimenez family is organizing food for everyone, she reported. The Winters brothers are setting up temporary shelters for those who need to stay. They're working together like I've never seen. Crisis has a way of showing what really matters, Clara said, accepting a cup gratefully. Through the window, they could see neighbors helping neighbors, the artificial boundaries Morrison had created dissolving in the face of shared triumph and grief. Old Pete Winters directed the younger men in repairing damaged fortifications just in case any of Morrison's scattered men thought to return. The women had established a makeshift medical station in the barn, tending those with minor wounds. As evening approached, Sheriff McKay returned from town with unexpected news. Judge Harrison is calling a special session tomorrow. He wants to formally clear Mrs. Dalton's name and address the distribution of Morrison's assets. Everyone involved in today's fight is asked to attend. "I'm not sure Ethan should travel," Clara said, her hand moving protectively to his good shoulder. "I'm fine," Ethan protested, though the room swayed slightly when he tried to sit up straighter. "You're stubborn is what you are," she shot back, "just like your father. My father would never have united the valley like this." "No," she agreed more gently, "but he would have fought for what was his. You did both." That night, as the ranch settled into an exhausted quiet, Clara found herself maintaining vigil beside Ethan's bed. He developed a fever not dangerous but concerning enough that she refused to leave him alone. Sarah spelled her, occasionally bringing food and fresh water, but Clara always returned to her post. "You should rest," Ethan told her during one of his lucid moments. "So should you yet. Here you are talking when you should be sleeping." He studied her face in the lamplight, noting the exhaustion she was trying to hide. "Clara, what you said earlier about it being different if you'd taken that bullet—" "Hush. We can talk about that when you're well." "I might be braver with a fever." That drew a small smile from her. "You were plenty brave today without one. Too brave." "I couldn't let him hurt you, not after everything." His good hand found hers. "These 5 days, they've been the most terrifying and most important of my life." "Mine too," she admitted quietly. "I came here running from one life and found another I never expected." "Will you stay? After all this settles, after the trials and the distribution of assets, will you stay?" She squeezed his hand gently. "Where else would I go? This is home now." The fever broke near dawn, and Ethan woke to find Clara asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. Sarah stood in the doorway with a breakfast tray, smiling at the scene. "She hasn't left your side all night," Sarah whispered. "She's stubborn," Ethan replied fondly. "Must be why you two fit so well together." The trip to town was slow and painful despite the wagon's cushioning. Clara drove while Ethan tried not to show how much each bump jarred his shoulder. Behind them, a procession of wagons and riders stretched back toward the ranch, the entire population of the valley heading to witness the formal proceedings. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity, people spilling out onto the street. Judge Harrison, looking grave but satisfied, called the session to order. "We're here to address the events of the past week," he began, starting with the matter of Mrs. Clara Dalton. Clara stood her back straight despite the exhaustion Ethan could see in her shoulders. "Mrs. Dalton, based on the evidence presented and the testimony of multiple witnesses, this court formally declares that you acted in self-defense in the death of Robert Dalton. All charges are dismissed and your record is cleared." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Clara nodded, her composure intact, but Ethan saw her hands tremble slightly as she sat back down. "Now," Harrison continued, "to the matter of Thomas Morrison. Miss Sarah Morrison, please stand." Sarah rose pale but determined. "Miss Morrison, your courage in bringing forward evidence of your uncle's crimes has served justice. This court recognizes that you are his only living relative. Normally, you would inherit his estate. However, given the criminal nature of his wealth accumulation, the court must distribute these assets to his victims. Do you understand?" "I understand, Your Honor. I don't want anything built on blood." "Nevertheless, the court recognizes that you are also a victim. Your father's legitimate property wrongfully taken by Thomas Morrison will be restored to you. The original Morrison homestead and its immediate 100 acres are yours by right." Sarah's eyes widened. "Your Honor, I—" "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank the law and the people who stood up to ensure it was enforced." The judge proceeded to outline the distribution of Morrison's vast holdings. The Roberts family received funds to hire investigators to find their daughter. The Cutters were granted pasture land that had originally been theirs. Each family Morrison had wronged received something back. "Mr. Hartley," the judge addressed Ethan, "Morrison held numerous false debts against your ranch. These are hereby nullified. Additionally, as you led the defense that prevented further bloodshed, the court awards you the water rights to Sweetwater Creek, which Morrison had illegally claimed." Ethan felt Clara's hand squeeze his arm. Those water rights would secure the ranch's future through any drought. "Finally," Harrison said, "Sheriff McKay has something to report." McKay stood a slight smile on his weathered face. "The federal marshals have confirmed that the Hutchkins brothers had bounties on their heads totaling $3,000. That money goes to those who brought them to justice. Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Dalton, and the defenders of the Hartley Ranch, that reward is yours to split as you see fit." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Ethan felt overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. Just a week ago, he'd been facing the loss of everything. Now the ranch was not only secure, but positioned to thrive. As people filed out of the courthouse, many stopped to shake Ethan's good hand or nod respectfully to Clara. The Winters brothers, Jake, still limping from his wounds, clapped him on his good shoulder. "Hell of a week, boss," Jake said with a grin. "I'm not your boss anymore. That job's done." "About that," Samuel Winters interjected, "Pa's getting too old to run our place alone. We were thinking of combining operations if you're interested. Pool resources, share labor." Ethan looked at Clara, who nodded slightly. "We're interested. Come by when I'm healed, and we'll talk terms." As they made their way to the wagon, Sarah approached hesitantly. "I don't know what to do with 100 acres. I've never run a ranch." "You'll learn," Clara told her. "We'll help you. All of us will." "Why, after what my uncle did." "You're not your uncle," Ethan said firmly. "You proved that when you stood with us. That makes you family now." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she embraced Clara impulsively. Over the young woman's shoulder, Clara met Ethan's eyes, and he saw his own thoughts reflected there. They were building something new, something neither of them had expected when she'd walked out of that sunset. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, each of them lost in thought. As they crested the hill that overlooked the property, Ethan felt his breath catch. The ranch spread below them, scarred by battle, but still standing. Their neighbors were still there, working to repair damaged 10 Gardens Care for Animals. It looked like a community, not just a ranch. "It's different now," Clara observed. "Everything's different." "Are you sorry your father's isolated kingdom is gone?" Ethan considered this, watching old Pete Winters teaching some young boys to mend fence, while Martha Cutter and other women worked in what had been his mother's neglected garden. "My father built walls," he said finally. "We tore them down. I think that's better." That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the ranch hosted an impromptu celebration. Someone had brought a fiddle, and music drifted across the yard. People danced, despite exhaustion and injuries, celebrating not just victory, but survival and newfound unity. Ethan sat on the porch, his shoulder preventing him from joining the dancing, but content to watch. Clara sat beside him, having finally been convinced to rest. "I never thanked you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For stopping that first night, for choosing this place to ask for shelter." She was quiet for a moment, watching Sarah teaching some children a dance step. "I think I was meant to stop here. I don't believe in fate, but something drew me to your door that night. My father always said this land tested people, showed who they really were. Then we passed the test. We did more than that. We changed the test itself." Miguel Jimenez approached with his guitar settling on the porch steps. Soon his rich voice filled the air with an old Spanish ballad about love and loss and finding home. Others gathered, drawn by the music, and soon the entire porch was crowded with people sharing stories and songs. "My grandfather would have loved this," Ethan murmured to Clara. "He always said a ranch should be full of life." It is now. As the evening deepened, people began to drift away, heading home or to temporary camps they'd set up. Sarah helped clear dishes, moving with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged. "I thought I'd stay a few more days if that's all right," she said, "until I figure out what to do with my land." "Stay as long as you need," Clara told her. "This house is too big for just 2 people anyway." Sarah's smile was knowing. "Just 2 people?" You sure about that? Clara flushed slightly, but didn't deny the implication. After Sarah went inside, Ethan turned to Clara with raised eyebrows. Just two people. Well, you haven't exactly asked me to stay permanent-like, she said with mock primness. Clara Dalton, will you stay permanent-like? That's not much of a proposal, Ethan Hartley. I'm wounded. I get allowances for lack of eloquence. She laughed, the sound bright in the gathering darkness. Ask me again when you're healed, when you can do it proper. I'll hold you to that. The next days passed in a blur of recovery and rebuilding. Ethan's shoulder healed slowly, but surely, the pain receding to a dull ache. Clara managed the ranch with remarkable efficiency, directing repairs and organizing the workers who came to help. Sarah proved invaluable, her education allowing her to handle correspondence and accounts. One morning, a week after the battle, Ethan woke to find Clara gone from her usual place at breakfast. Sarah directed him to the barn, where he found her working with a young horse, her movements patient and gentle. Didn't know you trained horses, he said. There's a lot you don't know about me yet, she replied without looking up. This one's going to be special. Look at the intelligence in his eyes. He's yours if you want him. She turned to him, then surprised. Mine? Every rancher needs their own horse. If you're going to be running this place with me, you need a mount that's truly yours. Running this place with you, am I? Aren't you? She moved closer, abandoning the horse to nuzzle at the hay. Your shoulder's looking better. Dr. Brennan says I'm healing well. Good enough to make that proper proposal you owe me. Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. Clara Dalton, you walked into my life when I needed you most. You saved not just my ranch, but my soul. You showed me that strength isn't about standing alone, but about knowing when to stand with others. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here? She studied him for a long moment, those green eyes serious. I was married before. It nearly killed me. I'm not Robert Dalton. No, she agreed, moving closer. You're nothing like him. You're kind where he was cruel, gentle, where he was harsh, strong, where he was merely hard. She reached up to touch his face. Yes, Ethan Hartley, I'll marry you. He kissed her. Then there in the barn, with hay dust dancing in the morning sunlight and horses nickering softly around them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. When? He asked. Soon, before anything else can happen to interrupt. Tomorrow. She laughed. That might be too soon, but next week, when the circuit preacher comes through. Next week? He agreed. The news spread through the valley like wildfire. Within hours, neighbors were offering help with preparations. Martha Cutter insisted on making Clara's dress. The Jimenez women promised food for the celebration. Even the Winters brothers offered to spruce up the ranch for the occasion. Seems the whole valley wants to be involved, Sarah observed that evening. They see it as a symbol, Clara said. Hope rising from violence, beauty from ashes. Or they just like a good party, Ethan added with a grin. The week passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Clara tried to protest the fuss, but the community wouldn't be denied. This was their celebration too, a marking of the valley's new beginning. The night before the wedding, Ethan found himself once again at his father's grave, this time with Clara beside him. I wish he could have known you, Ethan said. You might have softened him. Or we might have killed each other, Clara replied with wry humor. From what you've told me, we were too much alike in some ways. Both survivors. Both stubborn. Both protective of what's theirs. Clara leaned into him carefully, mindful of his shoulder. He raised a good son, even if he didn't always see it. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. The ranch had been transformed with wildflowers and ribbons, looking nothing like the battlefield it had been just 2 weeks before. Clara emerged from the house in a simple but elegant dress that Martha Cutter had somehow managed to make beautiful, despite the short notice. Her hair was pinned up with small white flowers, and she carried a bouquet of prairie roses that Sarah had gathered that morning. You're beautiful, Ethan breathed when he saw her. You clean up well yourself, she replied, adjusting his collar with gentle fingers. The ceremony was held in the yard with what seemed like the entire valley in attendance. Judge Harrison himself had come to officiate, saying it was the least he could do after all they'd been through. "Do you, Ethan Hartley, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Harrison asked, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "I do," Ethan said, his voice strong and certain. "Do you, Clara Dalton, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Clara replied, her green eyes never leaving Ethan's face. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. As Ethan kissed his bride, he felt something settle in his chest, a rightness that had been missing all his life. The celebration lasted well into the night. Tables groaned under the weight of food the neighbors had brought. Music filled the air, and dancing went on despite the late hour. Even Jake Winters, still limping, managed a few turns around the makeshift dance floor. "It's like the whole valley is celebrating," Sarah said, watching the festivities with wonder. "They are," Sheriff McKay told her. "This represents more than just a wedding. It's proof that Morrison didn't win, that fear didn't win. Love and community won." As the evening wound down, Ethan and Clara found themselves on the porch watching their guests enjoy themselves. The ranch was alive with laughter and music, so different from the lonely place it had been just 2 weeks ago. "No regrets?" Ethan asked. "None," Clara replied. "You." "How could I regret the best thing that ever happened to me?" Old Pete Winters approached slightly unsteady from Celebration whiskey. "You two did good," he said. "This valley needed shaking up, and you shook it proper." "We had help," Ethan pointed out. "Sure, but someone had to start it. Someone had to stand up first." He looked at Clara. "And someone had to show us that standing together was possible." As the last guest departed and quiet settled over the ranch, Ethan and Clara stood together looking out at their land. The moon was rising, painting everything in silver light. "What do you see when you look out there?" Clara asked. "The future," Ethan replied. "Cattle horses, maybe children someday. A life built on something more than just survival." "I see the same," she said softly. "I see home." They went inside together to begin their married life in the house that had seen so much pain and triumph in such a short time. In the guest room, Sarah slept peacefully no longer, the frightened girl who'd betrayed her uncle, but a young woman with her own land and future. "We should help her build a house," Clara said, "on her property. She can't stay in that old cabin Morrison left." "We will," Ethan agreed. "The whole valley will. That's how things work now." As they prepared for bed, Clara noticed Ethan wince as he moved his shoulder. "Still hurts." "Some. Dr. Brennan says it always will, especially when the weather changes. A reminder of what you did, what you risked." "Worth it," he said simply. "I'd take a dozen bullets to keep you safe." "Let's hope you never have to." She helped him with his shirt, her fingers gentle on the still healing wound. The scar would be permanent, a mark of the moment he'd chosen her life over his own. "Clara," he said suddenly, "that first night when you appeared at the ranch, were you really just looking for shelter?" She was quiet for a moment. "I was looking for somewhere to die," she admitted. "I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I thought maybe I'd just disappear into the wilderness, let the land take me." "What changed your mind?" "You did. Your kindness, your loneliness that matched mine. You gave me a reason to keep going. We saved each other then." "Yes," she agreed. "We did." The next morning brought normalcy, or at least a new version of it. Ethan woke to find Clara already up making breakfast and humming softly. Sarah was at the table going over plans for her property. "I want to raise horses," Sarah was saying. "Good ones for the army and the railroad." "Smart," Clara approved. "There's always a market for good horses." "Will you teach me about the training?" "Of course." Ethan joined them, accepting coffee gratefully. "What's the plan for today?" "The Winters brothers are coming to discuss the combined operations," Clara reminded him. "And Mrs. Cutter wants to talk about starting a school. A school. For all the valley's children. She says now that people are working together, they need a central place for education. On our land. Why not? We have the space, and it's centrally located." Ethan considered this. His father would have hated the idea of giving up land for a school, but his father's way had led to isolation and near ruin. If we're doing this, we do it right, he said. Proper schoolhouse, not just a converted barn. Clara smiled. I knew you'd say that. The Winters brothers arrived at noon full of plans and enthusiasm. The combined operations would allow them to share resources, workers, and knowledge. It was a new model for ranching in the valley, one based on cooperation rather than competition. Morrison had the right idea about consolidation, Samuel Winters said. He just went about it all wrong. This way we all benefit. And we all maintain our independence, Jake added. Nobody's forced into anything. As they discussed details, other ranchers arrived interested in joining the cooperative. By evening, they had the framework for something unprecedented in the valley's history. Your father would be spinning in his grave, old Pete Winters told Ethan with a grin. Maybe, or maybe he'd recognize that times change and we have to change with them. That night, as Ethan and Clara walked the property, checking on animals and repairs, they encountered Miguel Jimenez teaching his sons to mend fence by moonlight. Getting an early start tomorrow, Miguel explained. We're helping Miss Sarah clear her land for building. The whole valley's helping, his eldest son added excitedly. Pa says it's like the old days when his father first came here. Community, Miguel said simply. That's what we lost and what we're finding again. As they continued their walk, Clara slipped her hand into Ethan's. 5 nights, she said. That's all it took to change everything. 5 nights since you arrived, he corrected. But the change, that's going to take a lifetime to fully realize. Good thing we have a lifetime then. They stood at the spot where Clara had first appeared that sunset that seemed like a lifetime ago. The same view stretched before them, but everything about it felt different now. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd kept riding that night? Ethan asked. Every day, Clara admitted, and every day I'm grateful I didn't. A wolf howled in the distance, and Clara shivered slightly. Ethan pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. First winter's coming, he observed. It'll be hard. We've faced harder. Together, though, that makes it different. Everything's different together, she agreed. They made their way back to the house where Sarah had lit lamps and started dinner. The domestic scene so impossible just weeks ago now felt natural and right. I've been thinking, Sarah said as they ate, about what my uncle took from people. The money helps, but it doesn't heal the wounds. Wounds take time, Clara said gently. But also purpose, Sarah continued. I want to use part of my land for something special. A place where women like you, Clara women who need to escape bad situations, can come for shelter. Ethan and Clara exchanged glances. That's a noble idea, Ethan said. And dangerous, Clara added. Men like Robert, like Morrison, they don't like their property getting away. Which is why it needs to exist, Sarah said firmly. Will you help me? Of course, Clara said without hesitation. We'll make it work. Later, as they prepared for bed, Ethan reflected on how much had changed. The lonely, uncertain boy who'd stood at his father's grave was gone. In his place was a man with purpose, with community, with love. What are you thinking? Clara asked, noticing his distant expression. About my father's last words to me. He said the land would test me, show whether I was strong enough to hold it. You proved you were. We proved we were, he corrected, and we proved that strength isn't what he thought it was. Clara moved into his arms, careful of his shoulder. Your father was a man of his time. You're a man of yours. Our time, Ethan said, holding her close. This is our time now. The first snow came early that year, catching everyone by surprise just 2 weeks after the wedding. Ethan woke to find Clara standing at the window, watching the white flakes drift down in the pre-dawn darkness. Her silhouette against the pale light made his chest tighten with a feeling he was still learning to name. It's beautiful, she said without turning around, but it means trouble for the cattle. We'll move them to the lower pastures today, he said, joining her at the window. His shoulder ached with the weather change, just as Dr. Brennan had predicted. The Winters brothers are bringing their herd down too. We'll do it together. She leaned back against him and he wrapped his arms around her, still marveling that he could do this, that she was here and his. Together, she repeated. I'm still getting used to that word meaning what it does now. The work of moving cattle through fresh snow was hard and cold, but with the combined crews of both ranches, it went smoothly. Jake Winters, his leg finally healed enough to ride properly, worked alongside Ethan pushing the stragglers. Never thought I'd see the day when Hartley and Winters' cattle graze the same land peaceful-like, Jake said. Times change, Ethan replied, but his attention was on Clara, who was riding point with Samuel, her coat dusted with snow, but her seat in the saddle sure and strong. That evening, as they all warmed themselves in the Hartley kitchen, Sarah brought news from town. There's a man asking questions about you, Clara. Says he's from the Dalton family. Clara's face went pale, her hand finding Ethan's automatically. What kind of man? Well-dressed, lawyer type. He's staying at the hotel telling people he represents Robert's mother. She wants revenge, Clara said quietly. Robert was her only son. Right. Sheriff McKay, who'd stopped by to check on things, shook his head. Judge Harrison cleared you fair and square. There's nothing legal she can do. Legal isn't the only kind of revenge, Clara pointed out. That night, unable to sleep, Clara told Ethan more about Robert's family than she ever had before. His mother Constance, she's wealthy. Old money from back east. She never approved of Robert marrying me, said I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Did she know what he was doing to you? She knew. I went to her once early on, showed her the bruises. She said a wife's duty was to keep her husband happy, and if I was getting hit, I must be failing in that duty. Ethan's jaw clenched. Then she's as guilty as he was. She's worse. She made him what he was encouraged. His cruelty told him he was entitled to take whatever he wanted. Clara turned in his arms to face him. If she sent someone here, it's not for legal satisfaction. It's for something else. The next morning brought the answer. The lawyer, a thin man named Pemberton, arrived at the ranch with an offer. Mrs. Dalton, he said, refusing to acknowledge her married name, my client is prepared to offer you $20,000 to leave Wyoming Territory and never return. No, Clara said simply. You haven't heard the alternative, Pemberton continued smoothly. If you refuse, Mrs. Constance Dalton will use her considerable resources to make your life here unbearable. She has connections, influence. Your new husband's ranch could face difficulties getting contracts, loans, even supplies. Ethan stepped forward, his hand moving to his gun. Get off my land. I'm merely a messenger, Mr. Hartley, but you should know that my client has already begun purchasing debts in this valley. She's learned from what happened to Morrison, you see. She won't make his mistakes. The difference is, Clara said, her voice steady as steel. Morrison worked in shadows. Your client just announced her intentions through you. Sheriff McKay. You heard all that, didn't you? McKay stepped out from the next room where he'd been listening. Every word, ma'am. Sounds like extortion to me. Pemberton's composed facade cracked slightly. You can't prove. Just did, McKay said. Now you can leave peaceful-like, or I can arrest you and let you explain to Judge Harrison why you're threatening folks in his jurisdiction. After Pemberton fled, Clara sank into a chair, her composure finally breaking. It won't end. She won't stop. Then we stop her first, Sarah said firmly. She'd been quiet during the confrontation, but now her eyes blazed with determination. My uncle kept records of all his business contacts. I'll bet some of them had dealings with the Daltons. What good would that do? Ethan asked. Information is power, Sarah replied. Clara, tell me everything you know about Robert's business dealings. There has to be something we can use. They spent the day going through papers, both Morrison's and what Clara remembered from her years with Robert. As the sun set, they found a connection between Robert Dalton and a series of fraudulent cattle sales to the Army. Robert was selling diseased cattle and bribing inspectors to pass them, Clara said, reading the documentation Sarah had uncovered. Soldiers got sick, some died. And Constance Dalton was a partner in the cattle company, Sarah added triumphantly. Her signature is on these contracts. That's fraud against the federal government, McKay said when they showed him. The Army takes that serious. Serious enough to stop a rich woman from back east? Ethan asked. Serious enough to try, McKay replied. They sent the evidence with the federal marshals who were heading back to Cheyenne. The response came faster than expected within a week. Constance Dalton herself arrived in town, her private railroad car attached to the regular train like a statement of wealth and power. "She's demanding to see you," McKay told Clara when he brought the news. "Says she'll meet you at the Hotel Neutral Ground." "No," Ethan said immediately. "It's a trap." "It might be," Clara agreed, "but hiding won't make her go away." She looked at Ethan with those steady green eyes. "I need to face her. End this properly." "Then we go together," Ethan said. "All of us," Sarah added. "The whole valley, if need be." And that's what happened. When Clara walked into the hotel dining room to meet Constance Dalton, she wasn't alone. Ethan was beside her, Sarah behind them, and the entire room was filled with their neighbors, the Winters brothers, the Jimenez family, Martha Cutter, everyone who'd fought at the ranch. Constance Dalton sat at a corner table, an elegant woman in her 60s with cold eyes and Robert's cruel mouth. She took in the crowd with disdain. "I asked to meet with my daughter-in-law alone." "I'm not your daughter-in-law anymore," Clara said, taking the seat across from her. "And I don't go anywhere alone these days." "I can see that. You've certainly landed on your feet. A new husband, a ranch, all these, friends." The word dripped with contempt. "What do you want, Constance?" "I want you to pay for murdering my son. Your son tried to kill me. I defended myself. The court agreed." "Courts can be wrong." Constance leaned forward. "I know what you are, Clara. Trash my son picked up and tried to polish. But trash is still trash no matter how you dress it up." The room tensed, but Clara raised a hand, keeping everyone calm. "I know what you are too, Constance. A woman who raised a monster and called it love. Who taught her son that other people were things to own and break. How dare you? I dare because I survived him, because I'm free of him, and because you're about to be arrested for fraud." As if on cue, the federal marshals entered the dining room. Marshal Henderson approached the table with papers in hand. "Mrs. Constance Dalton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States Army." Constance's face went white. "This is ridiculous. I want my lawyer." "You can wire him from jail," Henderson said. As they led her out, Constance turned back to Clara. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Clara replied. "You just don't know it yet." The room erupted in cheers as Constance was taken away. Clara stood there for a moment, swaying slightly, and Ethan caught her as her knees buckled. "I'm all right," she said, though her face was pale. It's really over, isn't it, Robert? His mother, all of it." "It's over," Ethan confirmed, holding her tight. But Clara was wrong about one thing: she wasn't all right. That night she developed a fever, and by morning she was delirious. Dr. Brennan came immediately, his face grave as he examined her. "Exhaustion," he diagnosed. "Stress. Her body's been running on pure will for weeks, and now that the danger's past, it's demanding payment." "Will she be all right?" Ethan asked, fear making his voice rough. "With rest and care, yes, but she needs complete rest. No work, no worry, no excitement." Easier said than done. Clara tried to get up several times, insisting there was work to be done, until Ethan finally lost his temper. "Damn it, Clara! You're not invincible. You're human, and you need to rest." She blinked at him, surprised by his vehemence. "I'm not used to having someone else to rely on." "Well, get used to it. You've got me, Sarah, the whole valley. Let us take care of you for once." She relaxed back into the bed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't know how." "Then learn," he said more gently, wiping her tears. "The same way I learned to accept help. The same way we all learned to stand together." While Clara recovered, the ranch didn't stop. Sarah managed the household with quiet efficiency. The Winters brothers and Miguel Jimenez handled the cattle. Martha Cutter organized the women to help with cooking and cleaning. The school construction continued with donated labor and materials from across the valley. "It's like watching a miracle," Sarah told Ethan one evening as they watched neighbors working together. 6 weeks ago, these people barely spoke to each other. "Crisis has a way of showing what matters," Ethan replied. Morrison's tyranny brought out the worst in people: fear, isolation, suspicion, but fighting him together brought out the best. "Do you think it will last?" "I think we'll make it last." Clara's recovery was slow but steady. By the third week, she was able to sit up and receive visitors. The Roberts came with news they'd found their daughter in Denver and brought her home. "She's damaged," Mrs. Roberts said quietly. "What she went through, but she's alive and she's home. We owe that to you." "You owe it to courage," Clara corrected. "Your own courage and never giving up hope." As winter deepened, the valley settled into new rhythms. The cooperative ranching arrangement proved successful, with shared resources making everyone stronger. The school was completed just before Christmas, a small but sturdy building that would serve the valley's children for generations. The dedication ceremony was held on a clear, cold day with the entire valley in attendance. Clara, finally fully recovered, stood with Ethan as they watched Martha Cutter ring the school bell for the first time. "Education changes everything," Clara said. "These children will have opportunities their parents never did." "Because of you," Ethan said. "This was your idea." "Our idea," she corrected. "Everything is ours. Now remember." That evening, as they decorated their home for Christmas, their first Christmas together, Sarah brought unexpected news. "I've had an offer," she said. "A teaching position at the new school. Martha Cutter says I'm the most educated person in the valley, and the children need someone like me." "That's wonderful," Clara said. "You'll accept if you'll have me. I'd need to stay here at least until my house is built." "Sarah," Ethan said firmly, "this is your home as long as you want it." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "I came here to warn you about my uncle expecting nothing but hoping for safety. I found a family instead." Christmas brought the entire valley to the ranch for a celebration that would become legend. Tables groaned under the weight of food, children played in the snow, and music filled the air. Ethan stood on the porch, watching it all with wonder. "Thinking about your father again, Clara asked, joining him. "Thinking about how wrong he was. He believed isolation meant strength, that needing others was weakness. But look at this. We're stronger than he ever was precisely because we're not alone." "He did one thing right," Clara pointed out. "He raised you, and you had the wisdom to become yourself instead of becoming him." The winter was hard, as Ethan had predicted, but manageable with everyone working together. When the Jimenez family's barn roof collapsed under snow, the entire valley turned out to rebuild it. When the winter's well froze, the Hartley Ranch shared water until it could be fixed. "This is how it should have always been," old Pete Winters said during one of the communal dinners that had become regular events. Spring arrived with dramatic force, snowmelt swelling creeks and turning roads to mud. It also brought unexpected visitors, a wagon train of 3 families looking for land to settle. "We heard about this valley," their leader, a man named Thompson, said. "Heard it was a place where folks worked together, where a family could build something." The old ranchers might have turned them away, seeing competition. But the new valley welcomed them, helping them find unclaimed land, sharing resources and knowledge. "We're building more than ranches here," Clara told Ethan as they watched the new families setting up their homesteads. "We're building a community." "Your vision," he said. "Our reality," she corrected. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara took Ethan's hand and placed it on her stomach. "There's something you should know, she said, her voice soft but sure. Ethan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. We're having a baby. Dr. Brennan confirmed it this morning." Joy and terror warred in Ethan's chest. "A baby. Our baby." "Our baby," Clara confirmed. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He pulled her close, mindful of her condition. "But are you all right? After everything you've been through?" "I'm strong," she said. "We're strong. This child will be born into a world we've helped make better." The news spread quickly, as news did in the valley now. Gifts began arriving: blankets from the Jimenez women, a carved cradle from the Winters brothers, tiny clothes sewn by Martha Cutter and her friends. "This child will be the valley's baby, and," Sarah said, looking at the growing pile of gifts, "the firstborn into our new community." "The first of many," Clara said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. As summer progressed, the ranch thrived. The cattle were healthy, the cooperative was profitable, and the school was full of eager students. Sarah proved to be a natural teacher, patient but firm, inspiring children who'd never thought beyond ranch work to dream of bigger things. But the past wasn't quite done with them. One hot July day, a rider approached the ranch Pemberton Constance Dalton's lawyer, looking somewhat worse for wear. "Before you shoot me or arrest me," he said quickly, "I come with different news. Constance Dalton is dead." Clara's hand flew to her throat. "How it? Heart attack in federal prison. She was awaiting trial, refused to admit guilt or cooperate. The stress." He shrugged. "She left a will, a recent one written after her arrest." "We don't want her money," Ethan said firmly. "She didn't leave you money," Pemberton said. "She left you a letter." He pulled out an envelope sealed with wax. "Her instructions were that I deliver it personally and watch you read it." Clara took the letter with trembling hands and broke the seal. "My dear daughter-in-law," she read aloud, "if you are reading this, I am dead, and you have won. I spent my final days trying to understand how a nobody like you could destroy everything I built. I think I finally understand. You had something I never did. People who stood with you, not from fear or greed, but from love and respect. I raised my son to take what he wanted to see kindness as weakness. You proved that wrong. I hate you for that, but I also respect it. The Dalton name dies with me. Perhaps that's for the best. Whatever child you bear, and I know you will bear children, you have that look about you. Raise them better than I raised mine. Signed, Constance Dalton." The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Pemberton cleared his throat. "There's also a financial matter. She liquidated everything before her arrest, apparently planning to use it to destroy you. It's a considerable sum. By law, as Robert's widow, you're the only heir." "How much?" Ethan asked. "Nearly $100,000. Clara swayed, and Ethan steadied her. "We don't want it," she said. "Then donate it," Pemberton suggested. "But take it first. Don't let it go to the government. She would have hated that most of all." After Pemberton left, Clara and Ethan sat in stunned silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You could do so much good with that money." "It's blood money," Clara said. "No," Ethan said thoughtfully. "It's justice. Think about it. Constance and Robert caused so much pain. What better revenge than using their money to heal?" They called a valley meeting that night. When Clara announced the inheritance and their intention to use it for the community, the response was immediate and overwhelming. "A real hospital." Dr. Brennan said, his eyes shining. "We could have a real hospital." "Better roads," someone else called out. "Connect us properly to the railroad." "A library," Sarah added. "Books for the school and the whole valley." "All of it," Clara said. "We'll do all of it. This money will build the future Robert and his mother tried to prevent." The transformation of the valley accelerated. By the time Clara's pregnancy began to show, construction was underway on multiple projects. The hospital, small but modern, would serve not just their valley, but surrounding areas. The roads would make trade easier, more profitable. The library would open worlds to children who'd never seen beyond Wyoming. "You're building a legacy," Martha Cutter told Clara one day as they watched the library walls go up. "We're all building it," Clara corrected. "Every person who stood against Morrison, who chose community over isolation, we're all building it together." Fall came with its harvest of plenty. The cooperative's first full year was so successful that every family had money to spare for the first time in years. The harvest celebration lasted 3 days, with visitors coming from neighboring valleys to see what they'd heard about but couldn't quite believe. "It's like something out of a dream," one visitor said, watching former enemies work side by side. "It was a nightmare first," Ethan told him. "Sometimes that's what it takes to wake people up to what's possible." Clara's pregnancy progressed well, though Ethan worried constantly. His anxiety amused her even as it touched her heart. "I survived Robert Morrison and Constance Dalton," she reminded him. "I think I can handle childbirth. Those were external threats. This is natural, normal. What women have been doing since the beginning of time. That doesn't make it less terrifying." She kissed him gently. "No, but it makes it worthwhile." The first snow was falling when Clara's labor began. It started at dawn, and by noon the house was full of women who'd come to help. Ethan was banished to the porch where he paced with Jake and Samuel Winters, trying to distract him. "You'd think after facing down outlaws this wouldn't be so scary," Jake said. "This is different," Ethan replied. This is... A cry pierced the air. Not Clara's, but the high, indignant wail of a newborn. Ethan was through the door before anyone could stop him. Clara lay exhausted but triumphant, holding a bundle of blankets. "Come meet your son," she said. A son! Ethan approached slowly, as if in a dream. The baby was perfect tiny fists waving face red with the indignity of being born. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. Ethan thought about his father, about tradition and legacy. Then he looked at Clara, at what they'd built together. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Samuel Hartley, after the men who shaped this valley for better or worse. But he'll be his own man, make his own choices." "Thomas," Clara agreed, then smiled. "Though I suspect the valley will call him Tom." As word spread of the birth, people began arriving with gifts and congratulations. The house filled with neighbors who'd become family, all wanting to see the baby who represented their collective future. "He's the first citizen of the new valley," Sheriff McKay said, looking down at the sleeping infant. "Born into a place where people stand together instead of apart." That night, after everyone had gone home, Ethan and Clara lay with their son between them, watching him sleep. "Are you happy?" Clara asked, echoing her question from months ago. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Ethan replied. 6 weeks ago, I was alone, about to lose everything. Now I have you, our son, a thriving ranch, and a community that feels like family." "We have all that," Clara corrected gently. "Together." "Together," Ethan agreed. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the valley in pristine white. But inside the Hartley house, warmth and light prevailed. The journey that had begun with a desperate widow seeking shelter had become something neither Clara nor Ethan could have imagined: a love story. Yes, but also the story of a community reborn. In his cradle, little Thomas stirred but didn't wake. His parents watched over him, their hands linked across his small body, united in their determination to give him a world better than the one they'd inherited. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. Clara thought about that first night, standing at Ethan's door, running from her past with no thought of a future. Now she had both a past she'd conquered and a future bright with promise. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan. "For what?" "For opening your door that night, for giving me shelter when I needed it most." "Thank you," he replied, "for walking out of that sunset and into my life." They smiled at each other across their sleeping son, two people who'd found in each other not just love, but strength, not just partnership, but purpose. The ranch slept peacefully around them, the valley beyond it thriving under its blanket of snow, and all was well in this corner of Wyoming that had learned the hardest lesson of all, that together people could overcome anything. The winter that followed Thomas's birth was the harshest in memory, but the valley faced it with a unity that would have seemed impossible just months before. Snow piled higher than the windows, and temperatures dropped so low that cattle froze standing in the fields. But no family faced it alone. When the Thompsons' food stores ran low, neighbors appeared with supplies before they even asked. When old Pete Winters fell ill with pneumonia, Dr. Brennan moved into their house for a week, refusing payment beyond meals and shelter. Clara stood at the frosted window one February morning, Thomas sleeping in her arms, watching Ethan and the other men dig paths through the snow to connect the ranches. Her son was 3 months old now, with his father's dark hair and her green eyes a perfect blend of their strengths. "Your daddy's out there making sure everyone survives," she whispered to the baby. Learning that leadership isn't about standing above others, but about standing with them. Sarah entered the kitchen, shaking snow from her coat. "The school's roof is holding, but barely. Jake Winters says we need to shore it up before the next storm." "Then we shore it up," Clara said simply. "That school is the future of this valley." "You sound like Ethan," Sarah observed with a smile. "So certain about what needs doing." "We learned certainty the hard way, through blood and loss and fighting for every inch of ground." Clara shifted Thomas to her other arm. "But mostly we learned that certainty means nothing if you're certain alone." The work to save the school became a community effort, with even the children helping to clear snow and pass supplies. Watching them work together, Clara remembered her first glimpse of the ranch, empty and isolating. Now it was the heart of a community that pumped life through the entire valley. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Ethan pulled out a letter that had arrived that day. "It's from the territorial governor," he said, breaking the seal. His eyes widened as he read. "He wants to appoint me as a territorial representative. Says what we've done here could be a model for other communities." "That would mean traveling to Cheyenne," Clara said carefully. "Being away from the ranch." "I'd turn it down," Ethan said immediately. "My place is here." "Your place is wherever you can do the most good," Clara countered, "and maybe that's sharing what we've learned." Sarah looked up from her lesson plans. "She's right. What happened here, the transformation, it didn't happen by accident. You and Clara led it. Others could learn from that." Ethan looked at his wife and son, then at the window where snow continued to fall on their valley. "I'll think about it," he said finally. But the decision was taken from them 3 days later when riders appeared through the blizzard, not with offers or threats, but with desperate news. "There's been an avalanche," the lead rider gasped, ice in his beard. "The mining camp at Silver Creek, 30 men trapped, maybe more. We need every hand we can get." Without hesitation, Ethan began organizing. "Jake, Samuel, get ropes and shovels. Miguel, bring your boys and any dynamite you have left. We might need to blast through." "I'm coming too," Claire said. "Clara, you can't." "I can help with the wounded. Dr. Brennan will need assistance." She was already reaching for her coat. "Sarah can watch Thomas." "I'll keep him safe," Sarah promised, taking the baby. "Go." The ride to Silver Creek was treacherous, snow blinding them, wind cutting through even the thickest coats. But they pressed on a line of riders from across the valley, united in purpose. When they arrived, the scene was devastating. Half the mountain seemed to have come down burying buildings, and the mine entrance under tons of snow and rock. "My brother's in there," a woman cried, clutching at Ethan's arm. "Please, you have to help him." "We'll get them out," Ethan promised, though looking at the destruction he wasn't sure how. They worked through the night and into the next day, digging with desperate determination. Clara and Dr. Brennan set up a medical station in the one building still standing, treating frostbite and exhaustion as men pushed themselves beyond their limits. It was brutal work, but gradually they made progress following the sound of tapping from deep within the collapse. "There," Jake Winters shouted. "I can hear them." The final push to break through required Miguel's dynamite carefully placed to open a path without causing another collapse. When the explosion cleared and the dust settled, they could see into a pocket where 15 men huddled alive but badly injured. "Get them out careful now," Dr. Brennan directed. One by one, they brought the miners to safety. Not all had survived. They found 12 bodies in the end, but 18 men who would have died lived because the valley came together. The mine owner, a man named Harrison, who'd never shown interest in the local community, stood watching with tears on his face. "I don't understand. Why did you come?" "We're not from your valley. We're nobody to you." "Nobody's nobody," Clara told him firmly. "That's the lesson we learned the hard way. When people need help, you help. That's what makes us human." The rescue made headlines in newspapers as far away as Denver. "Wyoming Valley shows true American spirit," one headline read. Suddenly people wanted to know more about this place where former enemies worked as brothers, where a young rancher and his wife had built something unprecedented. The governor's offer became a formal appointment, and Ethan found himself reluctantly accepting. 3 months, he told Clara. "I'll go for the legislative session, share what we've learned, then come home." "We'll manage," Clara assured him, though her heart ached at the thought of separation. "The ranch, the valley, were strong enough now to stand without you for a while." "Not without me," Ethan corrected. "Never without me. Just with me somewhere else for a bit." The night before he left, they stood together in Thomas's nursery, watching their son sleep. "He won't even remember I'm gone," Ethan said sadly. "But he'll grow up in a world you helped make better," Claire replied. "That's worth 3 months of missing him." Ethan's departure left a void, but the valley filled it with collective effort. Jake and Samuel Winters took turns checking on Clara and the ranch. Sarah moved back from her newly built house to keep Clara company. The women of the valley seemed to appear whenever help was needed, as if they had some sixth sense for when Clara was overwhelmed. Letters from Ethan came weekly, full of frustration and hope in equal measure. The politicians here don't understand, he wrote. They think what we did was luck or accident. They don't see that it was choice, deliberate choice to be better than our fears. Clara wrote back, telling him about Thomas's first laugh about the new calves, about how the school children had put on a play about the battle against Morrison. They made you far too heroic, she wrote, though they got your stubbornness exactly right. 6 weeks into Ethan's absence, trouble arrived in an unexpected form. A group of men rode into the valley well-dressed and well-armed, led by a man who introduced himself as Colonel Wesley from the railroad company. We're surveying for a new line, he announced at a gathering he'd called in the schoolhouse. It'll run right through this valley, prime opportunity for those smart enough to take it. Where exactly would this line run? Clara asked Thomas in her arms. Wesley unrolled a map, and Clara's heart sank. The proposed route cut directly through the Hartley Ranch, the winter spread, and Sarah's land. You'll be compensated, of course, Wesley said smoothly. Fair market value. And if we don't want to sell, what? Old Pete Winters asked. Wesley's smile turned cold. The railroad has ways of encouraging cooperation. Eminent domain, for instance. But I'm sure it won't come to that. Reasonable people always see the wisdom of progress. After Wesley left, the valley gathered at the Hartley Ranch. Fear hung in the air, memories of Morrison's threats still fresh. It's happening again, someone said. Another powerful force trying to destroy what we've built. No, Clara said firmly, standing with Thomas still in her arms. This is different. We're different. We're not isolated families anymore. We're a community, and communities have power. What kind of power against the railroad? Martha Cutter asked. Legal power, political power. Clara looked around the room. Ethan's in Cheyenne right now at the legislative session. He has the governor's ear. Sarah, can you research the law on eminent domain? Already started, Sarah said, holding up a law book. There are restrictions requirements. They can't just take the land. And we have something Morrison never counted on, Clara continued. We have proof of what this valley can accomplish united. The rescue at Silver Creek, the cooperative success, the school, we're not just any valley anymore. We're a symbol of what's possible. They spent the next days preparing their defense. Sarah researched legal precedents. Clara wrote to Ethan explaining the situation. The community documented everything they'd built, every improvement, every success. When Wesley returned a week later with official papers, he found the entire valley assembled on the Hartley Ranch, united and ready. We have a counterproposal, Clara announced, standing at the front of the crowd. The railroad can have its line, but not through our homes. We've surveyed an alternate route along the eastern ridge. It's actually shorter and avoids the spring flood zones. Wesley laughed. You think you can tell the railroad where to build? We think the railroad should listen to people who know this land, Clara replied. We've sent our proposal to the territorial legislature where it's being reviewed by Representative Ethan Hartley and the Governor's Committee on Development. Wesley's face darkened. Hartley, you're his wife. I am. And these are his neighbors, his community. The same community that made headlines rescuing miners that turned a valley of feuding ranchers into a thriving cooperative. Do you really want to be known as the railroad that destroyed all that? Newspapers love David and Goliath stories, Sarah added. Imagine the headlines, Railroad Destroys Hero Valley. Not good for business, Colonel. Wesley stood there calculating. Finally, he rolled up his papers. I'll review your proposal, but don't think you've won anything. The railroad doesn't lose. Neither do we, Clara said simply. Not anymore. The standoff with the railroad lasted another month. During that time, Ethan's letters grew more urgent. I'm making progress here, he wrote. The governor is interested in protecting successful communities. Hold on just a little longer. Clara held on, but the strain was showing. Thomas could sense her tension crying more than usual. The ranch work normally shared with Ethan fell heavily on her shoulders, despite the neighbors' help. One particularly hard night, after Thomas finally fell asleep, Clara sat on the porch and let herself cry for the first time since Ethan left. Sarah found her there, bringing a blanket and silent comfort. He'll be home soon, she said softly. I know, I'm tired of fighting. Morrison Constance, now the railroad. When does it end? It doesn't, Sarah said. But that's not bad. Fighting for what's right, protecting what we've built, that's living. The alternative is giving up, and you're not capable of that. How do you know? Because I've watched you for months now. You don't know how to give up. It's not in your nature. Clara managed a small smile. Robert used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. Robert was wrong about everything important, Sarah said firmly. Your stubbornness saved this valley. The resolution came suddenly. Ethan arrived home unannounced on an April morning, riding hard with papers in his saddlebag. Clara, feeding chickens in the yard, dropped the bucket and ran to him, not caring about dignity or propriety. You're home. She breathed against his chest as he held her tight. For good, he said. And with news, the legislature passed a resolution protecting established communities from forced railroad seizure. The railroad has to accept our proposed route or find another valley entirely. We won. You won. You held them off long enough for the law to catch up. He pulled back to look at her. God, I missed you. And Thomas, where is he? Napping. He's so much bigger, Ethan. He's trying to crawl. They went inside together, and Ethan stood over his son's cradle, watching him sleep. 3 months, he said softly. I missed 3 months of his life. But you secured his future, Clara said. The legislation you helped pass doesn't just protect us. It protects communities across the territory. That afternoon, they called another valley meeting. When Ethan announced the railroad's forced acceptance of their terms, the celebration was immediate but also thoughtful. We did it again, Miguel Jimenez said. Stood together and won. It's becoming a habit, Jake Winters added with a grin. But old Pete Winters, wise with years, had a warning. Power sees what we've built here. They'll keep coming in different forms with different threats. Then we'll keep standing together, Ethan said, each time stronger than before. The railroad, true to Wesley's grudging word, built along the eastern ridge. The construction brought prosperity to the valley, jobs for local men markets, for local goods. But Clara and Ethan made sure the prosperity was shared, establishing a community fund from the railroad payments to help any family in need. Summer came with abundant rain and rich grass. The cooperative's second year promised to be even better than the first. The school had its first graduates, young people who could read and write and figure, prepared for a world beyond just ranching. One evening, as fireflies danced in the dusk, Clara and Ethan sat on their porch, watching Thomas take his first wobbling steps between them. Look at him go! Ethan laughed, catching his son as he toppled forward. Determined just like his mother. Brave like his father, Clara countered. Sarah came out with coffee, her own face glowing with news. I've had a letter, she announced, from the Territorial Board of Education. They want me to help establish schools in other valleys based on what we've done here. That's wonderful, Clara said, though her heart sank a little at the thought of losing Sarah. I wouldn't go permanently, Sarah clarified quickly. This is home. But I could travel, teach others what we've learned, then come back. The same thing they wanted Ethan to do with governance, Clara observed. We're becoming teachers for the whole territory. Because what we did here matters, Ethan said. It proves that people can change, communities can transform. That's a lesson worth spreading. As summer turned to autumn, the harvest exceeded all expectations. The community celebration lasted a full week, with visitors coming from hundreds of miles away to see the valley that had become legendary. One visitor stood out, a woman named Margaret Patterson from San Francisco, representing something called the Progressive Women's Alliance. We've heard about you, Mrs. Hartley, she said. A woman who stood against tyranny, who helps lead a community, who manages a ranch as well as any man. I do what needs doing, Clara said simply. Exactly, and we want to document it, share it. Women across the West need to know what's possible. Clara looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. Tell your story, he said. Let others draw strength from it. So Clara told her story, from the desperate flight from Robert to the triumph over Morrison, from building community to facing down the railroad. Margaret Patterson wrote it all down, tears in her eyes at some parts. This will inspire thousands, she said. Women trapped in situations like yours was women who think they have no power. I had no power alone, Clara corrected. It was only when I found others to stand with that I became powerful. Winter came again, but this time the valley was ready. Food stores were ample and shared freely. The new buildings were weatherproofed and strong. When storms came, people hunkered down together, no family isolated or afraid. On Christmas Eve, the entire valley gathered at the Hartley Ranch. The house overflowed with people, warmth and laughter. Children played while adults shared stories of the year. Thomas, now walking confidently, toddled from person to person, loved by all. "Speech," someone called out. "Ethan, give us a Christmas speech." Ethan stood uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing the moment's importance. "2 years ago, I stood at my father's grave, certain I would lose everything. I was alone, afraid, and without hope. Then Clara walked out of the sunset and everything changed. Not just because of her, though she was the catalyst, but because her arrival started something. It made me realize that my father's way, isolation, hardness, suspicion, was death. The only way to truly live was together." He looked around the room at faces that had become family. "We've been tested by greed, violence, and power. We've faced down outlaws, corrupt officials, and corporate might. And we've won. Not because we're especially brave or strong, but because we stand together. That's the miracle of this valley, not that we're perfect, but that we've chosen to be imperfect together rather than alone." "To the valley," Jake Winters raised his glass. "To the valley," everyone echoed. But Clara raised her own glass with a different toast. "To the future," she said. "To our children who will inherit a valley where cooperation is normal, where neighbors are family, where standing together is as natural as breathing." As the celebration continued around them, Ethan and Clara stepped outside into the cold, clear night. Stars blazed overhead, and their breath made clouds in the freezing air. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "That night you stopped here instead of riding on—" "Never," Clara said firmly. "This is where I was meant to be. We were meant to be. Even with all the fighting, the struggles. Especially because of those. They forged us into who we are." She took his hand. "That scared widow and uncertain boy who met 2 years ago, they're gone. In their place stand people who know their own strength and the power of community." From inside came the sound of singing voices raised in Christmas carols. Thomas's laughter rang out high and sweet, the sound of their community, their family, their life. "I have something to tell you," Clara said softly. "I was waiting for the right moment." Ethan turned to her, seeing something in her eyes that made his heart race. "Clara, Thomas is going to be a big brother." Joy exploded in Ethan's chest. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in the snow while she laughed. "Another baby. Another baby due in summer. Our family grows." "Everything grows," Clara said as he set her down. "The valley, the community, our family. That's what happens when you choose life over fear, love over isolation." They went back inside to warmth and light, to their son and their chosen family. The celebration continued late into the night, but Clara and Ethan retired early, Thomas sleeping between them in their bed, just this once a special Christmas treat. "Tell me a story, Mom,"